Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. It was just past midnight on May 18th, 2025, when a resident on Moorhead Avenue in West Conshohocken called 911. "I heard shots," the woman whispered. "Then someone ran. I think someone's hurt." The dispatcher stayed calm. The call lasted less than 40 seconds. Police were dispatched in under 2 minutes. But by then, the silence had returned, and someone was dying on the sidewalk. Moorhead Avenue wasn't known for crime. It's a quiet residential stretch in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Neat lawns, side-by-side homes, porch lights that flicker but never fail. But at 12:25 a.m., officers arrived to find a woman lying face down on the pavement just a few feet from her front steps. She had no pulse, no ID, no movement. Her hands were open, unarmed. She'd bled out where she fell. Paramedics worked anyway. They transported her to Lankenau Medical Center under trauma protocol. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Initial on-scene observations were telling. Officers noted a blood trail beginning from the edge of the front door, across the concrete path, leading directly to where her body collapsed. The door to the residence, a two-story white house with navy shutters, was slightly ajar. There was no sign of forced entry, no shattered glass, no broken lock. A quick canvass revealed 5 discharged shell casings, 3 inside the home, 2 on the walkway, all 9mm. No firearm was recovered at the scene. Detectives secured the property. Crime scene techs arrived at 1:42 a.m. and began immediate processing. They photographed the interior layout, which appeared tidy, almost too tidy. Blood spatter was observed on the wall adjacent to the living room entry point. There were faint smears on the wood flooring leading from the living room toward the door. There was no sign of robbery. Jewelry and electronics were untouched. Wallet on the table, laptop open, a ceramic mug with fresh lipstick still warm beside it. Surveillance coverage of the area was limited. The nearest working camera, affixed to a neighbor's garage, captured only the tail end of a vehicle pulling away at high speed. A silver Ford F-150, license plate obscured. Timestamp, 12:26 a.m. Inside the victim's house, officers identified no roommates, pets, or dependents. A driver's license later confirmed her identity. Alyssa Wiest, 25, resident of West Conshohocken. No prior criminal record. Employed as a microbiologist at GlaxoSmithKline. Lived alone. A contact in her phone, labeled Mom, was called at 3:37 a.m. She answered on the first ring. The victim's mother provided a voice calm but fraying. She's quiet, keeps to herself. Bright. That's who Alyssa is. Is. She didn't say anything was wrong. Not lately. When asked if her daughter had any current or former partners, she paused. Michael. She was seeing someone named Michael. I don't know his last name. It's been a while. They weren't living together. I think she wanted out. No text messages or call logs between Alyssa and this Michael appeared in the past 48 hours. Her most recent texts were work-related. That alone raised a flag. No personal messages. No friends. No movement. For a 25-year-old, that phone was too quiet. A quick forensic check revealed her phone had been unlocked at 12:17 a.m., then locked again. That was minutes before the shots were reported. As dawn broke over West Conshohocken, investigators stood on that small stretch of sidewalk. A young woman, accomplished, educated, and entirely without enemies, had been gunned down at her own front door. No witness saw the shooting. No weapon was found. And whoever did it, if it was someone she knew, left behind no digital trace, at least not one that made sense. Not yet. But there was one oddity. Her neighbors swore she hadn't had any visitors in weeks. And yet in the recycling bin out front, an unfamiliar coffee cup was found, still damp. Not from her usual place. No fingerprints on it, a black lid, no brand marking. For the techs, it wasn't much. But in murders like these, every object is potential evidence. The cup was bagged, sent to the lab. At 6:22 a.m., the forensic team completed its primary sweep. The blood pattern was logged. Spatter directionality noted. The initial hypothesis, the victim had been inside the home when the first shot was fired. She attempted to flee, was hit again near the threshold. Final shots struck as she crossed the path. Whoever fired those rounds stood close, within 6 feet, intentional. No sign of hesitation, no errant bullets. The shooting wasn't a chaotic act, it was methodical. Investigators made a note. Execution style, single subject, confined location, no defensive wounds, no sign of third-party struggle, high probability of personal motive. As her body was released to the coroner's office for post-mortem analysis, one phrase from the lead investigator's field notes stood out. She was supposed to be safe here. Someone came in knowing she would be alone. The official next of kin confirmation came just after 8 a.m. on May 18, 2025. Montgomery County authorities formally identified the deceased as Alyssa Rose Wiest, age 25, resident of West Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Cause of death: multiple gunshot wounds. Manner: homicide. Autopsy pending. Case status: active and high priority. Alyssa's apartment was sealed for a secondary forensic sweep by mid-morning. The first objective: retrieve all digital devices for analysis. Detectives from the Criminal Investigations Division logged and removed a silver MacBook Pro, an iPhone 14 Pro Max, and an external hard drive labeled Lab Data, March 2025. All were recovered from the living room. Power cables were still connected. Nothing had been taken. Nothing appeared deleted at first glance. The iPhone was unlocked by warranted Face ID spoof. Once inside, analysts noted a striking pattern. Alyssa's last outgoing message was a text sent at 7:18 p.m. the night prior. It was to a coworker, confirming a Monday morning meeting. After that, her device was completely silent. No outgoing calls, no texts, no app usage. Only system log movements. Screen waked at 12:17 a.m., then went dark. That gap caught the attention of lead analyst Rachel Ung. Her phone didn't crash. There's no power anomaly. But the behavioral freeze? That's unusual for someone this age. Alyssa's screen time reports supported the theory. On an average night, she spent at least 45 minutes on TikTok, another 20 on messages. She kept no activity logs after 8 p.m. The silence wasn't casual. It was consistent with external interruption, a confrontation or presence that stopped her digital routine altogether. Investigators next examined the MacBook. Internet history, emails, cached passwords, all intact. But two web tabs stood out, both opened around 11:54 p.m., the night she died. Tab 1, Restraining Order Pennsylvania, How to File. Tab 2, GSK Internal Hotline, Anonymous Reporting. Both were opened in private browsing mode. The hard drive held only work-related material. Nothing indicated conflict, intent, or risk, but it confirmed something else. Alyssa was precise, thorough. She documented everything related to her job: timestamps, samples, code logs. And yet, her personal life? Entirely offline. No diary files, no emotional notes, no journals. It was as if her boundaries were intentional, controlled. One more item was collected from the home office drawer, a partially torn notepad page that read simply, "Don't let him in. If he shows up again, call mom. Call HR. No more chances." No signature, no date. But the implication was clear. When Alyssa's autopsy began at 2:30 p.m., Dr. Helena Stafford confirmed 3 entry wounds, all 9 mimicomine inerrant as suspected. One shot entered through the lower back, indicating movement. The fatal wound passed cleanly through the upper chest, puncturing her heart. Death would have been near instant. No defensive wounds. No struggle. Stafford noted, she was upright, likely moving toward the door. Second and third shots came from a standing assailant within 6 feet. Controlled. Close range. No sign of hesitation or panic. This was not a scuffle. It was targeted. Toxicology came back clean. No alcohol, sedatives, or stimulants. Time of death confirmed between 12:20 and 12:25 a.m. The report was clear. Alyssa had not fought. She had not run far. She had tried to escape briefly. She made it as far as the steps. The door was not kicked in because she had opened it. That conclusion narrowed the suspect pool dramatically. You don't open your door at midnight to a stranger. You open it to someone you already know. Back in the digital evidence unit, metadata from Alyssa's iPhone location services filled in the rest. At 12:11 a.m., her device pinged the entry point to her home network. At 12:17 a.m., it recorded a screen activation consistent with Face ID use or movement. At 12:20, the device went still. The battery remained steady. The sensors reported no additional movement. Analysts noticed another oddity: a Bluetooth sync record from a previously paired device, a Ford F-Series entertainment system, briefly connected to her home network at 12:15 a.m. before disconnecting 2 minutes later. No Ford was registered to Alyssa. That device ID did not match any vehicle listed in her known contacts, but the log entry suggested someone had entered range, sat idle long enough for an autoconnect, then left. By cross-referencing with traffic flow data, investigators located footage from a PennDOT highway cam. A Ford F-150, silver partial plate match, was seen heading south on I-476 at 12:28 a.m., 2 miles from the crime scene. The plate number was blurred, but the shape of the back window sticker was unique. Traffic data, cell sync, digital silence. None of these alone built a suspect, but each one narrowed the funnel. As one investigator noted in their internal memo, the data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem, but in her case it didn't lie. She let someone in, not by force, but by mistake. By the afternoon of May 19, 2025, the case file on Alyssa Wiest had reached over 300 pages. Scene diagrams, shell casing trajectories, forensic sync reports, and toxicology confirmations had all been logged. What investigators needed now was motive. And motive doesn't come from evidence bags. It comes from patterns. Detective Claire O'Malley was assigned lead on the behavioral reconstruction. With 17 years on the force and certification in forensic victimology, she approached the file without speculation. The goal wasn't to guess who killed Alyssa. It was to understand why someone might have. O'Malley began by requesting Alyssa's full employment file from GlaxoSmithKline. The HR team delivered digital access the same evening. Her records were consistent, punctual, respected, 0 complaints filed against her, and none filed by her. But there was one anomaly. Alyssa had logged into the company's anonymous ethics portal on May 6, 12 days before her murder. She completed a draft report but never submitted it. The system cached the draft, flagged under an internal security protocol designed to detect abandoned entries. The contents were redacted, but IT confirmed it referenced a non-work-related personal conflict involving off-hours harassment. That entry had never been followed up, and it hadn't been linked to any GSK personnel. O'Malley pivoted to the personal side. She interviewed 5 individuals listed in Alyssa's emergency contacts and medical intake forms. Among them, her primary care physician, Dr. Patel, who noted that Alyssa had canceled a mental health referral in March. The reason? No longer necessary. That's the kind of detail that doesn't always mean much on paper, but to O'Malley it did, especially when paired with the partial search history retrieved from Alyssa's MacBook. Terms like restraining order process and how to document verbal threats. A pattern of escalation was beginning to emerge, but no police reports, no open case history, just digital breadcrumbs and private anxiety. To validate the direction, O'Malley requested access to Alyssa's smart home history, including any interactions with voice assistants, doorbell logs, or lighting schedules. The assistant device registered 0 commands between May 16th and the time of death. But before that, there was one unusual interaction. On May 10th at 2:38 a.m., Alyssa had activated her assistant and said, "Turn all lights on." No further voice activity followed. The lights were manually shut off 2 minutes later. That event stood out. It was not aligned with her usual sleep pattern, and it suggested one thing: she'd woken up afraid. With the help of forensic linguist Dr. Carla Nguyen, a profile was assembled. Alyssa was high-functioning, methodical, and intensely private. She followed procedure. She escalated only when she felt the situation demanded it. The incomplete hotline report and withdrawn therapy referral were not signs of inaction. They were indicators of hesitation in someone trained to analyze risk, but not conditioned to accept personal vulnerability. She was someone who didn't want to believe things had gotten out of control. Parallel to the behavioral work, the forensic team expanded their analysis of Alyssa's laptop. They discovered an encrypted folder labeled PERS Archive, Cracking it required a subpoena to her iCloud account and a 256-key decryption protocol. Once opened, it revealed over 300 screenshots, texts, social DMs, calendar events, spanning late 2023 through spring 2025. Most were benign, but approximately 28 were flagged. Each shared a common theme: unsolicited check-ins, overlapping GPS timestamps, and photos that appeared to be taken without her consent. At a cafe, near her gym, walking alone at dusk. Some messages included phrases like, "Didn't know you went to that part of town. You look tired at the grocery store. I saw you today. Why didn't you wave?" None of the messages were from saved contacts, but phone number metadata traced several to a prepaid device registered under a name that was either fake or misused. This wasn't casual digital noise. It was surveillance. That changed the tone of the case. It wasn't just a homicide. It was a pattern of targeted pre-violence behavior, a known red flag in stalking-related crimes. A report was filed with the Behavioral Analysis Unit at Quantico for review. The profile they returned, albeit preliminary, highlighted indicators of coercive control escalation: persistent digital tracking, possessive language, nighttime surveillance, and preemptive guilt shifting through text. This person, whoever they were, wasn't trying to reconnect. They were trying to dominate. At 5:42 p.m. that same day, a breakthrough came from a friend of Alyssa's, Dana Reed, who voluntarily appeared at the precinct. She carried a printed email exchange between her and Alyssa from mid-April, after a night Alyssa had abruptly left a small dinner gathering. In one email, Alyssa wrote, "He waited outside the whole time. He never came in, but I could feel it. He wanted me to see him waiting. That's what scared me. Not that he was angry, that he was patient." This was a critical data point. Alyssa was aware she was being watched. She didn't downplay it. She articulated it, but she didn't go to law enforcement. Like many stalking victims, she calculated risk based on escalation, not proximity. She didn't want to be the one making drama. She wanted to be left alone. The timeline was narrowing. A pattern was locked. The digital and behavioral trail intersected with precision. A person of interest was now within reach, not based on conjecture, but on systematic behavioral markers and cross-platform forensic alignment. And still, no weapon had been recovered. That too said something. On the morning of May 20th, 2025, the investigation turned from forensic analysis to tactical tracing. By this point, Montgomery County's task force had narrowed down its focus to a single detail: the silver Ford F-150 seen leaving the area of Moorhead Avenue at 12:26 a.m. on the night Alyssa Wiest was killed. It wasn't registered to her, nor had neighbors seen it parked nearby before. The footage was grainy, recorded from a fixed-position PennDOT traffic camera pointed at the intersection near Ridge Pike. What stood out wasn't just the vehicle's make and model, it was the shape of a rear window decal, a white geometric outline, partially obscured by glare, visible for exactly 4 frames. Detective Luis Carmona was assigned vehicle identification. He coordinated with PennDOT and used a DMV cross-filter query, limiting results by county, vehicle type, color, and presence of aftermarket window decals. The decal, as it turned out, matched a specific manufacturer, a motocross brand sold primarily in eastern Pennsylvania. This alone narrowed the pool to fewer than 80 trucks within a 60-mile radius. From there, the investigative team pulled vehicle inspection logs and parking enforcement hits. One entry jumped out. A Ford F-150 with a similar decal was cited for an expired meter in Warminster, roughly 35 miles from West Conshohocken. The citation was dated May 7, 2025. The registered owner, Michael R. Dutkiewicz. The name matched previous mentions in Alyssa's communications. While not saved in her contact list, metadata from prior iMessage threads confirmed he had been a frequent correspondent until mid-April, after which all messages ceased. Alyssa had archived and then deleted the thread, but backups recovered from her iCloud retention log revealed several dozen exchanges from earlier in the year. Tone analysis by digital forensics flagged multiple entries as control-oriented. With this information, detectives requested surveillance records near Michael Dutkiewicz's listed address. A gas station camera 2 blocks from his apartment captured a silver F-150 pulling in on May 18th at 12:42 a.m., approximately 16 minutes after the shooting. The timestamp matched vehicle movement predictions based on traffic conditions and highway exits. A license plate check confirmed the match. Investigators now had direct continuity. Moorhead Avenue, Highway Cam, Warminster Gas Station, Owner ID, a timeline that held. They moved quickly. At 1:15 p.m., a search warrant was executed on the Warminster residence. The Ford F-150 was parked in the lot, clean but still warm. Inside the vehicle, officers recovered a pair of work gloves, one of which contained trace blood spatter. A presumptive test confirmed it was human. Lab analysis was expedited. No firearm was found during the initial vehicle search. Inside the apartment, detectives documented personal effects, including clothing consistent with security footage, dark hoodie, jeans, and a gray cap. One drawer contained receipts from a local shooting range. One dated April 22, 2025, noted a purchase of 9mm rounds in lane time. The transaction was paid in cash. The casing type logged by the range matched the brand of spent 9mm shells found at the Wiest residence. While not definitive, it linked access to compatible ammunition within 3 weeks of the murder. Another item stood out. A printed photo of Alyssa was found inside a closed folder, placed between unrelated documents. It wasn't recent, possibly taken in 2024 according to timestamps on a duplicate digital version stored on a USB drive recovered from the apartment. Digital forensics later found search history on the suspect's home computer, referencing doorbell camera vulnerabilities, iOS remote access settings, and encrypted messaging tools. Most of the activity occurred in late April and early May. The full forensic timeline now presented a logical progression. Mid-April, Alyssa cuts off contact. April 22, ammunition purchased. May 6, Alyssa logs incomplete harassment report. May 10, assistant device records late-night lighting command. May 18, 12:25 a.m., gunshots reported. 12:26 a.m., F-150 captured leaving scene. 12:42 a.m., vehicle seen in Warminster. May 20th, physical evidence recovered from vehicle and residence. One detail troubled O'Malley. The inside of the F-150 was spotless. Too clean. The glove compartment was empty, no dust. The center console had been wiped. There was no trash, no mail, no scent residue. It was a cleanup job, but not one performed in a panic. That suggested forethought. Investigators now had surveillance placement, movement confirmation, and forensic trace, each layered on top of the other in a manner consistent with a methodical withdrawal. Still, the handgun had not been located. Without it, the ballistic match remained circumstantial, but it was enough for the DA's office to proceed. At 6:03 p.m., Michael R. Dutkiewicz was taken into custody at a nearby shopping plaza. He did not resist. When informed of the warrant, he said nothing. He did not ask what it was about. He was transported to Montgomery County Correctional Facility and held without bail, pending arraignment. The arrest was public. The motive was not yet. By May 21, 2025, the arrest had been made. But no one in the department viewed the case as closed. The weapon had not been recovered, and a charge without a conviction means very little in a case this deliberate. The focus shifted to forensic linkage, specifically how the fragments pulled from Michael Dukiewicz's truck and residence would hold up under laboratory scrutiny. The Pennsylvania State Police Crime Lab began a full cross-analysis of materials within 12 hours of seizure. The glove recovered from the F-150 tested positive for human blood. DNA typing confirmed it belonged to Alyssa Wiest. That placed her biological material in a vehicle she never entered willingly. But that wasn't enough. The DA needed to show sequencing. Not just that blood was present, but when it appeared, and how. Microscopic fiber traces found inside the glove matched the composite weave of a bath mat collected from Alyssa's residence. The lab reported consistent transfer from forceful contact, likely during physical interaction. This narrowed the window of contamination and strengthened timeline placement. Interaction inside the home, transfer to gloves, followed by departure. Meanwhile, the USB drive found in Michael's apartment held a folder named Archive A. It contained raw image files, GPS logs from a vehicle app, and several document exports from a note-taking application. Many were benign, but one entry stood out, a file titled Int Steps, created on May 12th. It was a checklist, not a diary, not emotional, just tasks. Park 2 streets down, wear gloves, no phone, wait until dark, check rear light cam, clean casing residue, do not talk. Each line fed into the prosecution's theory. This wasn't an outburst. It was methodical, prepared, and executed to avoid detection. Device forensics provided another breakthrough. Alyssa's phone had registered a brief Wi-Fi connection at 12:15 a.m., just before the estimated time of the shooting. That wasn't unusual in itself. What was notable was that a second device had briefly joined her home network for 87 seconds, identified as a Samsung Galaxy with a masked MAC address. The same masked device had previously connected on April 16th, April 29th, and May 3. Technically, that placed the suspect's phone within range of Alyssa's house on 4 separate late-night occasions in the weeks leading up to the crime. The lab couldn't definitively prove the device was in Michael's possession, but digital forensic pairing with metadata from his Google account, retrieved via warrant, confirmed that his primary Gmail login had been active on a Samsung device with matching specs during all 4 windows. The overlap was too specific to be coincidental. Still, the issue of the weapon remained open. Without the gun, ballistics couldn't definitively tie casing to barrel, but they could compare casing striations from the crime scene with those found at the shooting range where Michael had practiced weeks earlier. It wasn't perfect, but it was probabilistically significant. Out of 23 sample casings fired from rental weapons at the range, only one bore identical ejection marks and primer indents to those at the crime scene. That weapon, serial Meisher C9XR37, had been used on April 22nd under a walk-in lane. The user paid in cash and signed in under the name Eric D. That form, once retrieved, had handwriting consistent with a prior traffic citation issued to Michael in 2023. Handwriting analysis couldn't prove identity in court, but it suggested familiarity with the weapon now tied to the crime. By end of day, a cumulative forensic report was drafted for the DA's review. It included DNA match from blood in the glove, fiber transfer from Alyssa's property, documented planning file recovered digitally, device presence at the victim's residence pre-crime, probable use of the same weapon at a public range. This wasn't theory, it was sequence forensic logic built on time-stamped evidence and digital trace. No single piece stood alone, but the structure was now self-supporting. One investigator noted privately, "We're not chasing confession. We're building a timeline no one can step out of." By early June 2025, the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office moved the case into pretrial status. With a full digital forensic package, eyewitness corroboration of timelines, and physical evidence tying the suspect to the scene, prosecutors prepared for indictment on first-degree murder. But it wasn't just about what had been gathered. It was about what could survive court. The defense filed a motion to suppress key digital evidence. Specifically, they argued that the Wi-Fi access logs pulled from Alyssa Wiest's home network were too indirect to link to the accused. They claimed that masked MAC addresses were not irrefutable identifiers and could be misattributed in environments with overlapping devices. The prosecution rebutted with system-level logs, geolocation timestamps, and synced metadata that overlapped with Michael Dutkiewicz's Google activity. The presiding judge reviewed both arguments and ruled the data admissible. The ruling emphasized that while MAC spoofing exists in theory, intentional, repeated overlaps tied to a single physical device within a small residential radius on specific nights tied to escalation behavior made the exclusion argument weak. The digital evidence stood. Meanwhile, the search for the murder weapon continued. Despite neighborhood canvassing, property surveys, and waterway sweeps near Warminster and West Conshohocken, the handgun was never found. Detectives believe the weapon was either discarded along a back road or dumped into one of the many retention basins outside county limits. Without a precise disposal timeline, recovery remained unlikely. The case relied on cumulative force, stacked technical proof, mode of establishment, behavioral indicators, not one smoking gun. Alyssa's family was notified about the expected pretrial hearing date. Her mother declined media interviews. In a written statement delivered through their attorney, the family said, "We trust the justice system to do what Alyssa cannot now do for herself, to speak plainly, to respond firmly." Jury selection was scheduled for late July. Due to the nature of the case, the court granted a limited media gag order, meaning most trial details would remain closed until opening arguments. But one document did enter public record, a timeline summary filed by the district attorney's office. It included the date of the known ammunition purchase, the 4 nights when the suspect's device connected to the victim's Wi-Fi, the screenshot of the in-steps checklist, the time-stamped glove and blood DNA match, the exit path of the suspect's vehicle caught on surveillance, the timeline of Alyssa's digital silence beginning at 12:17 a.m. None of the data was speculative. All of it was forensic. For public context, these facts carried weight. But within court, prosecutors knew jurors would need a narrative, one grounded in order, but free from assumption. That's where investigative psychology entered. Dr. Nadine Rosenthal, an independent behavioral specialist, was enlisted to assist in shaping trial testimony. Her role wasn't to diagnose the defendant. It was to interpret patterned behavior, surveillance habits, coercive texting, physical distancing, and Alyssa's delayed but intentional steps towards seeking help. This helped present the relationship not as a sudden collapse, but as a slow build of power, imbalance, and fear. What strengthened the prosecution's case wasn't anyone's statement. It was the alignment. Every timeline entry corresponded to a technical log. Every emotion Alyssa had hinted at in emails or voice commands was now mirrored in evidence. Her smart home's lighting system, her canceled counseling referral, her unfiled complaint. Each was quiet but real. They showed not only the crime, but the conditions that let it build unnoticed. On June 18th, a grand jury reviewed the evidence packet. They returned with an indictment for murder in the first degree, aggravated assault, unlawful possession of a firearm, and criminal trespass. The charges were read formally in court. Michael Dutkiewicz entered a plea of not guilty. The trial was set to begin in August 2025. As of May 27, 2025, the case against Michael Dutkiewicz had formally entered the pretrial phase, with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office preparing its evidence package for presentation. A preliminary hearing was scheduled to assess whether the compiled forensic, digital, and testimonial material would support a trial by jury. The courtroom hadn't seen a crowd yet, no media cameras, no public frenzy. But within the legal system, this was already classified as a high-stakes case, due not to notoriety, but to the precision of its evidence trail. Prosecutors weren't building their argument on witness memory. They were building it on metadata, biological trace, and behavioral alignment. The Commonwealth's strategy was straightforward. Demonstrate premeditation through forensic timeline, eliminate reasonable doubt using digital continuity, and tie the accused to the victim's final movements with physical evidence retrieved from controlled environments. The defense had not yet outlined its strategy. However, preliminary filings suggested they would challenge the integrity of network-based location evidence, arguing that Wi-Fi logs were circumstantial and subject to spoofing or overlap. The prosecution had already anticipated that. Internal reports confirmed that Alyssa Wiest's home router had MAC address filtering and had not permitted any unregistered devices to connect prior to the incident windows. Furthermore, one of the defendant's own devices, verified by serial ID and Google location history, had linked to that same network on 4 occasions, including the night of the murder. This wasn't random signal collision. This was recorded proximity with pattern. As the district attorney's team finalized the witness list, it included the forensic analyst who recovered the glove with Alyssa's blood, the lead investigator who traced the surveillance path of the suspect's vehicle, the forensic pathologist who confirmed the ballistic trajectories, a behavioral expert familiar with digital stalking patterns. What made the case unusually solid at this stage was not an eyewitness or confession, but the absence of contamination. All recovered evidence had documented chains of custody. All timestamps were cross-verified. The defendant had no alibi. He had not reported his vehicle stolen. He had not disputed proximity. And yet one critical piece remained missing: the weapon. That gap did not derail the state's argument. A report submitted by the forensic ballistics team explained how spent shell casings recovered from Alyssa's residence shared firing pin and breech face markings with sample casings found at a shooting range Michael had visited weeks prior. The weapon used at that range, a 9mm semi-automatic, had not been recovered, but its rental log, ammunition purchase, and lane usage were documented. Payment was in cash under an alias, but surveillance from that day showed the shooter clearly: Michael Dukiewicz. Legal analysts reviewing the case saw the outline of a conviction already forming. Though not guaranteed, the technical precision of the evidence, combined with Michael's silence post-arrest, narrowed the defense's room to maneuver. The Wiest family remained out of public view. No interviews were granted, no public comments were made. Their presence was only felt through the sealed victim impact statement quietly delivered to the DA's office, a gesture the law required, but no one in the room treated like formality. At this stage, the process became procedural. Prosecutors would not overstate intent. They would let the data speak for itself. They didn't need a motive scrawled on a wall. They had the in-steps file, the checklist of movements and actions found on Michael's encrypted drive, time-stamped and unrevised. By the end of May, the evidence catalog included Alyssa's DNA and matching fiber found on gloves in the suspect's vehicle, device location logs showing approach and departure patterns, archived communication behavior suggesting isolation and controlled disengagement, post-incident vehicle footage placing the truck within minutes of the crime scene, a digital plan of execution recovered, logged, and authenticated. That's what remained when emotion was stripped away: a system of preparation, a scene of precision, and a victim with no chance to resist. By the final week of May 2025, the case file for Commonwealth versus Michael Dukiewicz had become one of the most comprehensive digital forensic compilations in recent county history. Nearly every component of Alyssa Wiest's final weeks had been reconstructed: her movements, her searches, her moments of quiet resistance. What couldn't be captured on video had been revealed through metadata, physical evidence, and the undeniable logic of sequencing. The system, by this point, had responded. A preliminary hearing was set. The grand jury had returned an indictment. The community where she lived, West Conshohocken, had begun to acknowledge the case not just as a crime, but as a warning. No new evidence had surfaced since the formal charges. But what stood out wasn't what had been found. It was what never existed in the first place. No 911 call from the suspect, no attempt to explain, no expression of remorse, and most critically, no proactive intervention when Alyssa began quietly pulling away. In a county bulletin issued to local law enforcement agencies on May 24th, Montgomery County officials outlined a community response initiative. It focused on three things: recognizing coercive control, improving anonymous reporting procedures, and enhancing digital forensic coordination with behavioral units. This wasn't just institutional housekeeping. It was systemic accountability, forced into motion not by legislation, but by one woman's silent trail of red flags. No member of Alyssa's family attended the press briefing. Instead, her mother submitted a single-page letter, which the district attorney read aloud. "My daughter followed every rule. She was cautious. She worked. She didn't provoke anyone. Her death isn't about a breakup. It's about what happens when people ignore patterns, when people dismiss quiet warnings." It wasn't a statement of blame. It was a reminder of how easily accountability is diffused until it's too late. At a campus event at the University of Delaware, where Alyssa had studied microbiology, a professor gave a short lecture titled "Data Never Lies." It wasn't about the case specifically, but the principle behind it, the concept that systems, when preserved and interpreted correctly, can reveal truth even when voices are gone. And Alyssa's data had spoken. Each timestamp, each device sync, each deleted but recoverable file had closed the space where doubt might have lived. It told a story not of ambiguity, but of escalation. In communities like hers, crime doesn't always appear as chaos. Sometimes it starts with a message that's a little too persistent, a visit that wasn't expected, a silence that grows. And unless someone intervenes, it ends in a way that looks, on the outside, sudden. But nothing about this case was sudden. There were signs, there were decisions, there was planning, and there was loss, documented in terabytes, but lived in seconds. No sentence, whenever handed down, will correct the failure to act earlier. What it can do, what it must do, is make that failure visible. As of May 27, 2025, Michael Dukiewicz remained in custody without bail. A trial date was pending. The weapon had not been found, but the absence no longer mattered. What existed was sufficient. What was missing spoke for itself. The silence wasn't the mystery, it was the aftermath. What happened to Alyssa Wiest wasn't a sudden act of rage. It was the result of overlooked patterns, quiet signals, and the false belief that control stops short of violence. If you followed this story to the end, here's what I've learned. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't strangers, and silence can be a survival tactic, not a weakness. If you or someone you know feels watched, pressured, or isolated, document it, speak up, and don't second-guess your instincts. What do you think? Have you ever witnessed something that didn't feel right, but stayed quiet? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. If this video resonated with you, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, or if it didn't, tell me why and how it could have been better. And if you'd like to see more stories that matter, that expose the truth behind the silence, then hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next case.